Okay, at this time, I'd like to call to order the meeting. Excuse me. At this time, we're going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Franklin Township Zoning Hearing Board. And I will ask if there's any public comment unrelated to the hearing that's coming up. Nothing at this time. So we have some procedural and a reorganization to discuss up here.
I move that we select Bill Finch. Now, do I ask you also?
Just the officers first, so you have to do
Okay.
the vice
Myself?
chair, vice chair, and secretary.
I'm Connie Chasen. Hey.
Well, you're supposed to be assigning positions to the three people, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
And you are a member,
I'm a
correct?
member.
Right. And Nancy, Cromie is an alternate. Anyone second that?
So it,
Can I tighten it up and
yes, go ahead.
pick the thing off? I move what we nominate, or I nominate Bill to be the chairman of the board. Connie to be the secretary. What was the third position?
Vice chair,
Vice chair, I'm sorry.
right, secretary.
And I'm the secretary.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we retain Vicky Custo of Clemens, Richter, and Rice as our solicitor for the zoning hearing board.
Second.
So at this time, we're going to have the hearing in regards to the stall variances.
I have some background to do first. I apologize. So let me just read the whole notice so everyone knows why we're here. So this is the appeal of the revocable trust of Jonathan Ruane Stahl and Dawn Michelle Stahl. The applicants are the owners of property located at 552 Chesterville Road, known as tax parcel number 72-5-32.1G. The property is located in the LDR Low Density Residential District. The applicants are requesting the following relief from the zoning ordinance. A variance from section 27-1408.1.f to permit a driveway with a slope gradient of 12.5% where 10% is permitted. A variance from section 27-1407.1.a to permit more than 30% of a moderately steep slope area to be disturbed. A variance from section 1407.2a to permit more than 15% of a severely steep sloped area to be disturbed. A special exception under section 1407.2.c.7 to permit accessory residential uses and structures, a residential driveway and parking area to be located within a severely steep slope area, and any other zoning relief necessary to permit the proposed single-family dwelling use on the property. Just by way of background, this is a formal hearing, so public comment will not be received during the examination of witnesses, but there will be ample time at the end of the hearing for there to be public comment. During the public comment portion, you'll be asked to identify yourself and your place of residence. Because this is a formal proceeding, the zoning hearing board may not be able to answer any questions that you raise, but they can be posed to the applicant. The zoning hearing board is also not able to express any personal opinions on the application. For those, there's two ways that you can participate in the hearing this evening. You can provide public comment, and there's a second more involved proceeding, which is where you actually become a party to the proceeding. If you become a party to the proceeding, you are entitled to cross-examine the applicant's witnesses as well as call your own witnesses. In addition, you would be able to participate in any appeal to the court as a result of the decision made at the proceedings. You do not have to become a party if you just simply want to make public comment. Your comments and opinions will be heard and considered at the end of the hearing. Do we have anybody present tonight who would like to be a party to the proceeding? I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to go on. There are no minutes taken by the township at this hearing. You can purchase transcripts from our court reporter, and if you'd like to get a transcript, you can speak to her after the proceeding. I have some exhibits that I need to mark for this evening's hearing. So exhibit 1 will be the zoning hearing board application with attachments that was received by the township on April 28th of 2022. Exhibit 2 is the proof of publication for advertising notice of this hearing on June 6, 2022 and June 13th of 2022. Exhibit 3 is a letter dated May 30th of this year to the applicant's attorney, Neil Land, advising of tonight's hearing date. 4 is an affidavit of mailing dated May 31st of 2022 sent by Donna Eller, legal assistant at my office, and a copy of the list of the property owners who were notified. And Township Exhibit 5 is a property posting notification by Paul Labe, who is the zoning officer, that was dated June 7th of 2022. The applicant is present this evening with their attorney. Mr. Land, I'm going to turn it over to you. And do you want to just have all your witnesses sworn at the beginning who are going to testify? Go right ahead. Okay. Who do you have? Do you want?
Good evening, board. Good evening, township staff and others. My name is Neil Land, and I'm the attorney on behalf of your applicant tonight. The applicant tonight, we're seeking relief relative to their property or its property, because the applicant is a trust. It's a revocable trust. And I have with me, Mr. Stahl here is the trustee of that trust. This is property at 552 Chesterville Road. This is a property that the trust anticipates or hopes that you'll authorize building a single family dwelling there for the Stahls to reside in. Unfortunately, this property, as you'll hear testimony of, has a lot of steep slopes on it. And to that regard, unfortunately, requires us to seek 3 variances and 1 special exception per the terms of your zoning ordinance. All of the relief we're seeking tonight is relative to steep slopes because that's where you'll hear testimony that, you know, the access way and the driveway into this property is going to have to go through steep slopes. There's no other place to go on the property without it. And that's also where the parking area, if you will, outside of the house, as well as the house itself, will be located in steep slopes area. Again, you'll hear Mr. Schreier, our expert, testify that the way this property is situated, there's no other location on it for this house to be located. And so what we'll be telling you is that for the variances, that's the hardship. The hardship is the unique and physical characteristic of the steep slopes on this property. I think that applies to both or all 3 of the variances we're seeking, as well as the special exception relief we're seeking. Okay, I've handed you up an exhibit book, has, I think, 9 exhibits in it, and we'll be referring to that through both of our witnesses. So the question I have is, the first witness is going to be Mr. Stahl. Do you want him up here? Where do you want him to testify?
Okay, why don't you come around to this microphone here? And then that way you can you'll both be on the microphone.
Whatever's easiest. Yes, thank you. May I turn this just a little bit? Thanks.
People out in the side of the can hear you. There's a button on the right of the little person. If you push that.
Can we have both of our buttons on at the same time?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Otherwise, I will get lost in the proceedings if that's the case. Okay, great. Will you please state your name for the board?
Sir John Stahl.
Okay. And are you familiar with the revocable trust of Jonathan Ruane Stahl and Don Michelle Stahl dated October 30th, 2018?
Yes.
And What is that trust?
Trust that Dawn and I created back in 2018, I guess after my mother passed away, we figured that was the best way to do our future state and learn dealing with hers.
So let me turn your attention to Exhibit A1 in the package that I've just handed you. Can you identify Exhibit A1 for the board, please?
That's the trust agreement, revocable trust agreement that we drew up together. Dawn and I.
Okay, and is that a true and correct copy of the original trust document?
Yeah, there's a copy of it, yes.
All right, and who's the current trustee under this document of the trust?
Myself and my wife, Dawn.
Both of you. Okay, and are you and her, or you are her, or her authorized to make decisions on behalf of the trust as the trustee?
Yes,
Does it require both of you or just one?
just one.
And have you been authorized by the trust to come here tonight and testify?
Yes,
Okay. Are you familiar with the property at 552 Chesterville Road here in Franklin Township, which is the subject of this hearing?
yes.
Okay. How are you familiar with it?
We purchased it back in 2018.
Okay, and is that property now owned by the trust?
Yes.
Okay, let me turn your attention, the board's attention to Exhibit A2 in the package. And can you identify for the board, please, what A2 is?
That is the deed for the property.
Okay, and is that a true and correct copy of the original deed?
Yes.
Okay. What date did the trust become the owner of the property?
I guess that was like the October 30th.
2018, correct?
2018,
And
yes.
am I correct that you and Dawn owned the property individually before it was transferred to the trust?
Yes,
Okay, when did you all originally purchase the
it
property?
was February of 2018.
So I'd like to give a general description to the board of where your property is located at. Let me turn your attention, the board's attention to Exhibits A3. There's two documents there, or I should say two aerial images there. Can you identify and speak to the first one? Tell me what it is and where is this property located at?
The property highlighted there with the red, the trapezoid along Chesterville Road.
Okay, UPI number 72-5. Oh my,
That's 32.1
thank
G.
you. Thank you, thank you. Okay, and that's 3 acres?
Yes,
Okay, plus or minus. Let's go to the second paper in Exhibit A3. That's more of a lower elevation view of the property. Would you agree?
yes, it is.
Okay, and does that accurately reflect what you understand to be the layout of the property?
Yes,
Okay. And what township is that property located in?
in Franklin Township.
Okay. Can you give a general description to the board of the property, including any known environmental issues that might be out there or aspects?
I guess the most unique, not even unique, the thing about it is that the frontage along Chesterville Road is very steep. And there's really no access really to even get to the lot off of Chesterville Road due to the steep slopes.
Great, great, okay. What's currently being, what is the property currently being used for?
It's nothing right now.
Okay, so it's undeveloped.
Undeveloped, yes.
There's no development on, no structures?
No.
Okay, no roadways?
No.
Okay, and what is your intent to do there? What are you asking for permission to do?
We'd like to build a single family home on there,
And who would reside in that home?
Dawn and I.
Let me turn your attention to Exhibit A4. Can you please tell the board what A4 is? Let's start with the first image.
It's basically a picture of the property along Chesterville Road, I guess showing the south view on the steep slopes.
And as I look at this picture, the property would be located to the left side of the road?
Yes,
Okay. Can you identify the second picture, please?
it's the property down the north view, to be on the right side of the road there. It's showing again the steep slopes of the property.
Okay. And the third picture?
I get another view of the property looking north, showing the steep slopes and kind of where we would hopefully put the driveway to go up into the property.
Okay. And again, that's Chesterville Road. I see on the left there in that photo.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to the next picture, please. What is that?
That's a picture basically where right about where the driveway would be for the property there. That's kind of with a white little tape mark on it. And I show again, showing the steep slopes of the property.
And driveway hasn't been built yet, driveway hasn't been laid out yet, other than in the engineering plans we're going to
Correct.
be referring to. Thanks. And the next picture in A4?
Again, just showing more of the steep slopes of the property that need to be
Okay.
for access to.
Who took these photographs?
I did.
And when did you take them?
That was back in May, it's about a month ago.
Okay, okay. And these accurately reflect the condition of the property today?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. You understand that if this is approved and you build your property, the driveway is going to need to have permission to come out on Chesterville Road, correct? Okay, and you're aware that they call that a highway occupancy permit?
Yes.
All right, let me turn your attention to Exhibit A5. Can you please tell the board what A5 is?
That is the highway occupancy permit that we received from PennDOT for the driveway location.
So you've already received it. Looks like it was issued on November 25th, 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And this application, or I'm sorry, this permit expires on, one second here, November 25th. Nope, I'm sorry. It now expires on November 25th, 2022. Is that correct?
Right, yeah, we had to get the whatever supplement addendum, whatever it's called, to get it. It's only good for a year.
And as the last page of Exhibit 5 confirms that extension?
Yes.
Okay. And these are true and correct copies of the original permit, correct? Okay. Do you know what the uses on any of the adjoining properties in that area are?
Single family homes.
Where have any businesses or other commercial uses in that immediate area?
No.
Okay. Can you see any homes from the location on your property where you're proposing to put your home?
Yeah, you can see, I guess, either neighbors home from there.
Okay. You're proposing a single family dwelling, correct?
Yes.
Can you generally describe for the board that structure, what you're proposing, including its size, number of bedrooms, things of that nature?
We were looking at, basically, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-story house with like a loft on the top. With the thing says like 2.5 baths.
Okay, let me turn your attention to Exhibit A6. Can you please tell the board what these, what the pages in A6 show?
That's a picture of the home that we were hoping to build there on the property.
That's the first picture?
Yes.
Okay, and what is the second picture?
That's the first one, I guess, more of a conceptual, I guess, drawing. The second one is actually of the house, the physical house being built.
And that was built for someone else, but that's a
Correct.
style that you're looking at and you hope to build there if this is approved.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to the third page of,
There's another, I
A6.
guess, view of the house. I think this one's more from the rear side.
okay. What about the next page?
The next one's the layout of the first floor of the home.
And again, that's the layout you're hoping that you can construct there if you get your approvals.
Yes.
Okay. And then the last page of A6.
The last one was the second floor loft bonus room, however they call it. That's for the second floor of the house.
Okay. Who prepared all these documents in A6?
I did.
You did. Okay, great. And when did you prepare them?
I was back in May as well.
Okay. If this is approved and you get to build it, who's going to reside in this home?
On and on.
Have you spoken to any of your neighbors about your proposed use?
I've spoken to the one neighbor, Mr. Gontars, because he was helpful during a lot of the testing that needed to be done on the property, since there's really no access to it from Chesterville Road. He was very kind to let, I guess, because when Tom needed to go there for Hillcrest to do like his soil testings and some septic perk testing, things like that, gave them access to the property from his property to do that.
What was his last name? Can you?
Gontars?
Gontars. And did Mr. Gontars raise with you any objection to what you're proposing?
No. He's actually very kind. He actually gave me some insights on things that he encountered when he built his home many years ago.
And where is his property located in relative to
Just
your
north of
property?
our property.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Stahl. Board, that's all the questions I have for Mr. Stahl this
I have questions. Okay.
So I'm looking at Hillcrest plan right here, and I don't know whether you can answer this or not, though. So did you attempt to mitigate, accessing these steep slope areas? Did you try to buy an easement off neighbors or anything like that that would help you avoid the steep slope?
I guess Tom did recommend that actually one point in time about easements, but we've actually Dawn and I had experiences with our family, people doing that, and it did not turn out very well. So we opted not to go that route.
Just, looking at Hillcrest's plan, I don't have the complete information, but there's no steep slopes between your lot and Gypsy Hill Road? Maybe you can answer that.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say-
we'll have Mr. Schreiber
Okay.
up here in a minute if you want to ask him. He's probably better suited for that.
Okay. I mean, did you have involvement on the selection of where the driveway is located? Or mostly you deferred to your landscape?
No, actually, Tom and I met out there at the property and talked about it, and it's just if you look at the lot, I mean, that's kind of like the lowest or the what's the word to use, the least invasive access, I think, to the property from Chesterville Road.
So you couldn't put it down, access more of the white area that I'm looking at on the plan here?
And that might be better for the engineer.
Probably, but I guess again, it's just from my non-technical viewpoint, you can look from where the proposed driveway is, and you go to the left to the right, the steep slopes are very high, and actually that's the lowest point to get to the property. There'd be some severe, I think it'd be for construction wise, it'd be some severe heavy cutting and grading you'd have to do to get access to the property. Now on the right side, it's probably at least 14 foot high from the Chesterville Road on the south side.
Is it heavily wooded?
No, actually, it's not. The pictures kind of look that way. I mean, it's wooded, but I wouldn't, you can actually navigate there. I know from when the guys did the testing and stuff like that, they could actually get the little track hoe wherever they do the dig with it. It was like, so it was not like it was in their way or anything.
Anybody else for this one?
I guess I'm a little confused. You're claiming a hardship, and that's the unique slope of the lot. That's your hardship.
That's correct. To say it differently, the hardship would be the slopes, the both moderately and severely existing slopes on the property, and the inability to avoid them in developing or accessing this property. That would be the hardship. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Stahl. Next, I call Thomas Schreier. State your name for the record, please.
Thomas Schreier,
And Mr. Schreier, where are you employed?
Hillcrest Associates.
In what capacity are you employed there?
I am the vice president and registered landscape architect for them.
Okay, and how long have you been, have you worked at Hillcrest?
Just shy of 10 years.
Okay. Are you a licensed landscape architect?
I am.
In what states are you licensed?
Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware.
And how long have you been licensed in each of those states?
8,
All three of them?
yes.
Let me turn, is that exhibit book still up there? Let me turn your attention to exhibit A8, I'm sorry, A7. Take a look at that and please tell the board what that is.
This is my CV, which ultimately is a record of my educational and professional experiences.
And if you were to testify in detail as to your educational and professional experiences, would that testimony reflect what is contained in the CV?
Yes.
At this point, I would like to ask the board to have Mr. Schreier acknowledged as an expert in landscape architecture.
Any questions on his expertise?
So move.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Bear with us, Lord, it's been a while.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Welcome back. So, Mr. Schreier, are you familiar with the property at 552 Chesterville Road here in Franklin Township, which is the subject of this hearing?
I am.
And how are you familiar with that property?
I am the project manager for the engineering plans that have been developed it, and as well as visited the site with John.
Okay. Have you prepared any land development plans for that property?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to direct you to Exhibit A8 in the package. Can you identify, please, that what A8 is for the board, please?
They would be the engineering land development plans for the property.
Great. And we also have those, we can put them on the, oops, back here, the screen, or we have it back here. Which is easier for you, Tom, to refer to the screen or your large?
It's whatever's easiest for the board.
I'm gonna bring your large board over, so
hold it.
maybe you can refer to it.
It can be a Vanna White.
Okay. All right. And Tom, when did you prepare these plans?
September of 2021
And what's the use that's proposed for this project?
is single family home.
Okay. And referring to your plans, where is the single family dwelling proposed to be located on the property?
It would be this box here in the center of the property.
Okay. With regard to that proposed location, well, let me back up and say, and where would the driveway access be located to the
The driveway
dwelling?
access starts here along Chesterville Road and then continually wraps around the back of the house to the front and then ultimately to the garage there on the south side of the home.
Okay, and is there a reason for the design swinging as far as it does to the side?
So ultimately, a lot of the design is based around trying to align the driveway with some of the contours in the property to mitigate a lot of the cut fill necessary if you were to cross the contours in a perpendicular nature. And then obviously the long curvature and then coming around the house is to give us enough driveway length to try and lessen the slope of the driveway to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance to the best of our ability.
Great, okay. And in your design, what, if any, zoning relief is needed to have that design approved?
In terms of any of the area and bulk regulations, associated with the underlying zoning district, there are none area and bulk variances needed. This complies with the setbacks and impervious coverage that would be associated with the LDR.
Okay, outside of the standard area and bulk standards, is there zoning relief that is required for this project?
Yes.
Can you explain to the board what zoning relief is needed and why it's needed?
Yep. So where they were seeking 3 variances, most of them are which to disturb steep slopes. So specifically it would be section 27-1408, which is a variance requested to propose a driveway steeper than greater than permitted. Where the maximum slope permitted would be 10%, our driveway is 12.5%. The second variance would be 27-1407-1A, which is to disturb the moderately steep slopes greater than permitted, where 25% is the maximum allowed and 30% is what is being proposed by this plan. And then the third one would be 27-1407-2A, which is to disturb the severely steep slopes greater than permitted, where the maximum permitted by code is 15, and our current proposal is to 48. 48.
Mr. Schreier, is there a special exception relief that's also needed?
Yes.
Can you explain that to the board as well,
So
please?
there's a special exception to allow accessory structures within the severely sloped district, which would be the dark shading on the property. And those accessory structures, according to the township zoning officer, would be a driveway and the retaining wall on the south side of the driveway.
So this plan has been reviewed by township personnel?
Yes.
Who reviewed it?
LTL Consultants, which I think is ultimately the township engineer as well as the township zoning officer.
Okay. And did they present you and or Mr. Stahl with a review letter?
Yes, we've received 2 from Pete Eisenbrown in terms of the engineering and 1 from the zoning officer, which ultimately was the denial letter that triggered the need for the variances.
Let me ask about that first. So turn your attention to Exhibit A9. Can you identify, please, what A9 is for the record?
Yep, this would be the denial letter from the zoning officer at LTO.
And the zoning relief that you referred to and spoke to a moment ago, were those specific code sections and the need for relief therefore, were those determined by LTL consultants? And are they set forth in this review letter?
Yes.
You also said that the plan was reviewed by other individuals at the township. Who reviewed it?
Pete Eisenbrown, which is the township
Oh,
engineer.
Eisenbrown. Okay. And did they have any other comments other than what we have here from LTL?
They have very minor comments regarding the stormwater management and things of that way, nature, construction of the retaining wall and those. So most of those items are cleaned up at this point. We're just kind of left with obtaining these variances to move forward from here.
And for those other items, the retaining wall and the things of that nature, there's no zoning relief or other approval that's needed from this board.
No.
All right. So in seeking our variance, as you know, one of the criteria under the law is we have to prove a hardship. And can you explain to the court what the board, I apologize. Said with due respect, of course. What characteristics of this property exist, if any, that would meet the hardship standard under the law?
Well, in my opinion, the hardship for this property would be that the entire frontage of the property along Chesterville Road is encumbered with steep slopes. So to be able to gain access to this lot of record, there's really no way to not disturb those steep slopes, other than potentially seeking an easement, as someone has previously said, through neighbors' properties or other access ways, which my client has already stated was not a pleasant experience in his past.
Sure. And just so I'm clear, the steep slopes that front Chesterville Road, do they stop suddenly at the property line there, or do they extend into the properties both north
They
and south?
extend into the properties both north, south, and to the east. We ultimately just stop our steep slope analysis at the property line, so that, because we want to focus solely on what our client owns.
Okay. There's other zoning relief we need relative to the extension of the driveway and the house as well, correct? Variances.
In terms of the steep slopes, I mean, I guess the
Yes.
other one would be the driveway.
The driveway.
So ultimately, I mean, if you can see all the dash lines that kind of cross this plan horizontally, the whole property itself slopes from Chesterville all the way up to the rear property line. So in an attempt to get up to the top of the hill to where we could build the house and place it in an area that is a little bit less encumbered with steep slopes, we're needing to utilize a driveway slope that is a little bit more than permitted. What we have done, though, as part of this is proposed a reversed frontage house, in that the front of the house is actually facing the rear of the property, so that we can minimize our disturbance to the steep slopes and then obtain a longer driveway to minimize the actual slope of the driveway and be in as much compliance with the maximum permitted slope.
Great, thank you. Is there any way that a proposed house on this property could be accessed without going through steep slope areas
No.
on this property? Thank you. All right. As you know, the township ordinance sets forth criteria for variances. I think they're set forth in zoning ordinance section 2204. I'd like to go through those if I could with you. Are there any unique physical circumstances or conditions that are peculiar to this property that create an unnecessary hardship on the applicant relative to the proposed development of this property?
Yes.
And what are they?
The steep slopes along the frontage of the property.
Because of the steep slopes on this property, is there any possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance, so that the authorization of a variance or variances is not necessary to enable the reasonable use of the property?
No.
Will a variance, if authorized, substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of any adjacent property, or otherwise be detrimental to the public welfare?
No.
Is the requested variant, and let's strike that, are the requested variances the minimum variances that will afford relief and represent the least modification possible of the zoning ordinance in issue?
Yes.
In your expert opinion, do these factors which you just recited meet the evidentiary criteria necessary to enable this board to grant the three requested variances, namely from sections 1407.1A, 1407.2A, and 1408? All right. Applicant's also seeking a special exception pursuant to zoning ordinance 1407.2C7, correct?
Yes.
And again, can you please explain what the reason for that relief is?
The special exception ultimately is to permit the driveway and retaining wall associated with the construction of a single-family home within the severely sloped areas.
Thank you. And you're familiar with section 2205 of the Franklin Township zoning ordinance, which sets forth the criteria for the grant of a special exception?
I am.
Okay. I'd like to review those with you if I could, please. Will the proposed use of a single-family dwelling on this property jeopardize the public health, safety, or welfare of the township or its residents? Does the proposed use of a single-family dwelling on this property, is that consistent with the goals and objectives of the Franklin Township Comprehensive Plan and the Franklin Township Open Space and Recreation Plan?
Yes.
Is the size, scope, extent, and character of the proposed single-family dwelling in compliance with the spirit, purpose, and intended standards of the Franklin Township zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Is the proposed single-family dwelling compatible with the type of development in the area surrounding this property?
Yes.
Is the proposed single-family dwelling suitable with regard to environmental conditions, highway access, and availability of sewer and water facilities?
Yes.
Will the proposed single-family dwelling injure or detract from the character of the neighborhood in this section of the township?
No.
Okay. Will this proposed dwelling have any negative impact with respect to traffic patterns, volumes, access, or parking?
No.
Will this proposed dwelling increase the traffic congestion or otherwise create traffic congestion in this section of the township? Okay. And in your expert opinion, has the applicant satisfied all the evidentiary criteria necessary for this board to grant the requested special exception relief?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Schreier at this time.
I guess I'd like to ask the same questions I asked Mr. Stahl. But let me start with something first. In your calculations of disturbed area, is that everything inside the limits of disturbance?
Yes.
So anything inside the LOD line is disturbed area
Correct.
on your calculations. Even though it might not get regraded or graded, it's still considered disturbed areas if it's inside your LOD.
Yes, so some of those areas that don't actually show proposed grading would be areas for like the septic system and the dry well. So there's still disturbance. We're digging up the ground.
Right.
We're just restoring it to the existing
Okay.
contour.
So I guess, my questions involve, maybe mitigating this hardship, an easement. It doesn't look like it's steep slopes coming off Gypsy Hill Road.
We don't actually hold any frontage along Gypsy Hill Road.
No, I realize you don't though, but I mean, if you had an easement to access the property though, it looks like the property could be built, the house could be built without any variances at all.
Well, I don't know how that would be the case. I mean, ultimately, are you just referencing because around the property edge it's white?
Yeah,
Because that hasn't, a steep slope analysis hasn't been performed for those areas.
okay.
So for me to know if there's steep slopes from here to Gypsy Hill, I mean,
You don't know,
I
right.
would not actually know. that.
I'm just looking at your contours shown on your plan and it looks like they are fanning out pretty good, but maybe they do close.
I
close
think
up there.
ultimately it continues its steepness pretty around that whole corner. And then as you know, Gypsy Hill itself is relatively steep. So obtaining access off that road through several properties to gain access to this would be a cumbersome task for anyone, and it could, ultimately monetarily affect the client.
And how come the house wasn't, or the driveway and the house wasn't slid a little bit? I guess based on your drawing, it would be south, to access, go through less of the severe steep slopes and put the house in more of the white area on the print.
So ultimately, the severely steep slopes that are being disturbed are along this whole frontage. So sliding the house left or right, up or down really doesn't do anything in terms of the disturbances to those slopes. And the reason, as John reiterated earlier, is that we selected this is if you drive by this site, this location here is actually the least steep part of the whole frontage. Along this side and then north of it is, almost a vertical bank, which would cause problems once you get to construction because you'd be ultimately excavating from Chesterville Road to create that slope up. The location that we've chosen is actually looks like it may have been some access at some point because it provides kind of a little bit of a gradual slope and then it ramps up. So to allow construction to kind of start creating that entrance without burdening the actual travel lanes of Chesterville Road.
And I guess my last question would be, like, in your opinion, why do you feel that, why do townships have these slope ordinances and limits on disturbance of the slopes?
Well, I think ultimately a lot of these ordinances that get put in place are there to prevent development such as like subdivisions from disturbing steep slopes. This here is an existing lot of record. It's not being created by this. It hasn't been created by this. Ultimately, my client is left with what the lot is because it was created whenever this lot was created. So while we understand that, we want to preserve steep slopes because they're considered a natural resource, we're doing it to the best of our ability. I mean, at this point, we have almost a 500 linear foot retaining wall to try and mitigate some of the disturbance to those slopes as part of installing the driveway.
The structures that you proposed to go into the severe steep slope, retaining wall, and what else did you say? I missed that.
It's the driveway.
Oh, just the driveway.
Yep.
Well, now, if you should have a number of people come to that house for some kind of a party or whatever, where are they gonna park?
Well, they can park in the driveway.
Can they get in and out?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, current driveway regulation within Franklin Township only requires you to have a 10-foot wide driveway. Our application is actually proposing a 20-foot entrance off of Chesterville to allow for proper turning radius and then anything else that may come in.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You made reference to the 500-foot of retaining wall. And in an engineering way, I suppose this print tells me, but I'm not that bright. How high would you represent this wall is? I mean, what are we talking about sticking out of the ground here?
I'm just gonna look here. I think anywhere from it's going to be 6 to 8 feet in its entirety.
Most of that run up, it'll be in the 6 to 8 range. Okay.
Which is why on sheet 2, there's an engineered wall section. And then if you look, the LOD is offset off the back of that wall for obviously that swale, but we're also having to do geogrid tiebacks, which is ultimately when you go up a certain number of courses of wall, they install fabric tiebacks into the earth behind it, the height of the wall, and then stake it into the ground so that it prevents that wall from heaving in the future. Heaving.
I have a couple. I'm sorry, could you say again the length of the retaining wall?
I think it's approximately 500 feet.
And is that just at the very bottom of the driveway?
You'll note it's to the south of the driveway, and then it continues all the way up, about halfway up. Once we're able to kind of catch grade and not disturb so much of the slopes around it.
Okay. Stormwater.
Yes.
What are we doing for stormwater?
So this plan, and I can switch to the second plan, it's actually proposing 2 subsurface dry wells. I mean, I think everyone in the room understands that the current regulations require any development to reduce the runoff in the post condition to less than the pre-condition in any storm, whether it be the 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year, all the way up to the 100. So we have a dry well here in this location here, which is collecting all the runoff from obviously the house through the roof drains. And then we have several inlets that connect collect all the runoff from kind of the swales around it. The second drywall location is at the bottom of the driveway here in this location, which is collecting any of the driveway that we're not able to collect. Obviously, there's some portions of the driveway that aren't being collected, and our way of mitigating that and why we show kind of the offsite property is that there is significant ground that kind of drains to this lot because of the whole hillside. So we're collecting offsite runoff, mitigating it to allow some of the other areas that we're disturbing and aren't being able to be captured to run off the property.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand what you just said. That line in the back is actually stormwater that's coming from the lot behind and running down over the property.
Correct.
Okay, so the stormwater is generally running from the rear and actually off the property out to the road.
Correct.
Okay. One of the other questions that I had for you is, under the standards for special exceptions in this district, it talks about adequacy of access to the site for emergency vehicles. Has the plan so far been reviewed by the fire marshal?
It currently has not been reviewed by the fire marshal.
Okay.
And I wanted to actually double check this and I didn't get too much of a chance, but so the actual maximum permitted driveway slope within the township is 12%. The actual section that we're seeking a variance from is to do with the steep slope districts. So the ordinance steps the maximum permitted slope from 12 to 10 when you're putting a driveway within steep slopes.
Okay.
So our current driveway, while it's at 12.5%, is essentially meeting the township maximum permitted, but because the driveway is being located within a steep slope, we're technically only allowed to be to permit 10%, which is what's causing the need for the variance.
Okay.
But we
And
would be more than willing to let the fire marshal review it. As PennDOT has already approved the entrance, we do not see any issues with that.
In fact, Tom, that review will be part of the land development process. If it passes here, it goes to the township for review by their consultants and ultimate approval by the supervisors, and a review by the fire marshal will be part of that process, correct?
are you going to go through the land development process for a single family?
Well, it's essentially the land development process, just not with the planning commission and board of supervisors. You're
Right.
still having the full township engineer, the zoning officer reviews.
Well, you're going to go through a building permit process.
Correct.
Right, okay. I just want to make that clear so that
Understood.
anybody in the audience doesn't think that this is going to be another big proceeding for you, so,
Thank you.
okay. I think that's all I had for now. Anymore?
Vicky, just to let you know, Paul Lee, the zoning officer from LTL, is on. If anyone wants to ask you any questions or if he wants to share anything.
I have a question.
Yes.
When I look at the pictures, it's a very heavily, not heavily, it's a significantly wooded lot, which I assume is what is currently stabilizing the slope. You're going to take a lot of trees out. And the proposal is you're going to then provide stabilization with a 500-foot retaining wall?
Well, so the retaining wall ultimately isn't going to provide the stabilization. What provides the stabilization for the disturbed area is the erosion control blanket that gets stapled onto the ground once grass seed is planted. So you spread the seed and then you roll these blankets out and you pin them to the ground, and then ultimately the grass grows up through them, which it's a standard engineering practice, which is shown on the second page by all of the hatching. And you'll note there is significant hatching around the whole area which is being disturbed.
And that is as good as tree roots?
I don't know if I have an opinion on that, but yes.
Okay. All right.
Did I understand you correctly that where the driveway makes the turn and starts to come away from the northern property line is the last place that you'll have stormwater management?
Stormwater, there's another basin here with an inlet down here. is right at the lower side of the plan.
So the long slope coming down to Chesterville Road.
This slope here, yep.
You have a creek directly across the road there, right?
But ultimately, our calculations, which LTL has reviewed, is that we're effectively reducing the runoff from the site from a precondition to a post-condition. And we're doing that because we're mitigating off-site runoff that's coming onto the property.
I understand that. My concern is the runway you're setting up for it all to cross in one.
So
Gosh,
it's actually, there's, it comes down, yep, there's a low point here, which then creates a swale to the existing inlet to the north of our property. Then this has all been reviewed by LTO, but so this all comes down the driveway. The driveway, before it goes up, actually dips and then goes up, which creates a low point. From that low point, it drains at a positive slope north along Chesterville to the existing inlet. That then goes through an 18-inch.
okay, so that's under.
Yep.
Okay,
That's properly sized for ground counts on that.
Yes. And ultimately PennDOT has a say in it because they don't want runoff from our property onto their roadway anyway. So they're going to evaluate that just as much as Pete from LTO will.
Another question. What carries the water, the runoff to the dry well?
It would be a grass swale. Or it could be collected in some of the inlets that we are proposing along either side of the driveway. So we have, when you create a driveway, you typically have a pitch to it where the center point of the driveway is the highest and then it pitches to either side. So you'll note that we have driveway swales on either side. And then every so often after, the water, there's enough length, we propose an inlet, which then the water would drain into, go into a pipe system, which ultimately gets conveyed to the ultimate dry well.
How many inlets do you have? Can you point them out?
Yeah, there's one here, which is a 24-inch inline drain. There's one up here, which is another 24 inline drain. There's another 24-inch inline drain here. And then there's one here associated with this dry well. The lower dry well, ultimately there is a 30-inch drain basin associated with it. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I have another question. Do dry wells, do you have any experience with a failure rate on them, that they get blocked?
Well, so ultimately, at the last inlet before any dry well, what we do is we provide a 2-foot sump. So you'll have the drain basin that goes down. You'll have the pipe from that drain basin that distributes the water into the dry well. And so below that distribution pipe, we put 2 feet below that of additional inlet. So when the water comes in, it goes to the bottom first to allow the sediments and debris to fall below it, and then the water raises up and then enters into the dry well. So as long as the owner of the property is maintaining the dry well according to the operation and maintenance agreement, which is a standard document by the township, the dry well itself will function just like your septic system.
Is this a bounce site? Excuse me, is this a bounce site, the cuts and fills? Are you hauling the cut off site or are you going to move it somewhere else on the property?
We at this time have not run a cut fill analysis. Typically, we don't run that. We would let the site contractor do those calculations.
Because just looking at your profile, there's a good bit of dirt getting cut out for the driveway.
And we're cutting it, but we're also filling it in this
On that
location.
side.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the board? You're good? Okay. Do you want to do closing there, or do you want to wait till the public has had a chance to ask questions and make comment? I think Bill has one question for your first witness. Yeah.
Mr. Stahl, right? Were you aware that these variances and exceptions would be needed when you purchased the lot?
Not really, I would say, I guess. I knew we had some problem, not knowing the full process, but knowing that with the steep slope, I figured it had to be something that had to be done. Some rules to follow, but it was an education process, I guess, the only focus on, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Philip Reed, 2 E's and Reed. 547 Chesterville Road, which is like 100 feet north of their downstream of their driveway or their property line. So maybe 200 feet from their driveway. And I'm an elected auditor, but I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here as a hothead, local hothead. And I don't really have any quarrel with what they're trying to do. I mean, I'm sure it's all in good faith, but the problem is they are sitting underneath that church, which was built, I bought my house maybe 33 years ago. It was built maybe 25 years ago. And it's been nothing but trouble since. As far as water goes, it's a nice place, but they keep putting roof on, they keep paving it, they keep putting sports fields, they mow the grass, and it washes out. There are 5 driveways that it washes out, including Pico, which is pretty tough to wash out Pico. And I'm the only one that has the original culvert for the last 25 years. And mine was completely undermined. It was just fortunate that the front held on and it gave it a steeper slope. So it cleans out quicker, but it's a big 30-inch concrete culvert. And I put plastic on either side. I put $950 worth of riprap, which is, that's what a load costs now, just about 6 weeks ago. And I'm maxed out and for water coming through there. And as I say, everyone else has been washed out and has had to put a bigger thing, but the water comes across that road and there's a shallow, it's not part of White Clay Creek, but it is spring fed. It never dries out. And it roars when it rains. And there is not only the biggest roof that church has, the biggest parking lot and the second biggest sports field, but it also has the biggest retention pond. And there has never been water in that retention pond. The only water that gets in there is what rains in there. There were walnut trees growing out of it. They finally took them down, but they were drowned if there was water in there. And that it's not perfectly clear on this map, and it crosses 3 other people's property before it hits this property. But that water just roars across when we get an inch of rain, which is not unusual. And when we get 2 inches of rain, which is not unusual, it backs up and creates a mess. And nobody does anything. I mean, I've been complaining, not shy about complaining, for years about this thing. And it's just a joke. It's got 2 drains that go into it. I mean, little, drains. And last year, one of them was covered in a truckload of tan bark, I mean, and and they've cleaned it out. It's not the church's fault. You can drive into that parking lot. You don't have to get out of your car. You can see that there are barriers, earthen barriers that keep the water from going in it. It's on either side. There's a field, I believe the church owns the farmer's field. There's a fair amount of water comes off that. Huge amount that comes off from the blinking sign, like the, that grass, which they cut like a golf green. And there's a little bit of a swale that nudges it that way, but not enough. And it's just not dropped in. It has to drop in another 4 or 5 feet. Water goes downhill. And from the athletic fields, when they originally put that in, I think it was Pico made them put it in 97 when Floyd hit. And I mean, when Pico loses a culvert, that's a big deal. They probably had steam engines building that, that power line, the old, that was the 20s. Since then, they doubled the size of the church. They probably tripled the size of the parking lot. And they put the sports fields, and the sports fields have what is probably a safety barrier for kids running off, but it blocks all the water going into the, it's looks like maybe I don't design sports fields, but it might be there. So it's a consistent end of the run out area. So, you don't fall and break your leg, but it blocks the water from going in, and it all goes, those people that have the ponies on Gypsy Hill Road, it goes across their backyard, across the next one, and then it pretty much hits that lot. So to me, they can't do anything to that until Gypsy Hill Road is fixed. They can, until the church is until that retaining pond has got, I don't know, probably an 8 foot drain in the middle of it, concrete drain. There has never, I go up there when it rains 4 or 5 inches. I just drive by, and there has never been water up to that. I mean, we're not talking up to the top of it. We're talking at the base of it. It just doesn't function, and nobody does anything about it.
So here's the question, where's the church in relation to this property?
If you look at this map, the little box map,
Yes, the one at the top.
yeah, and then you go, if you just for conversation, it's not, but if you call the top of the map north, so if you go south, you'll hit Gypsy Hill Road.
Okay.
The intersection where Gypsy Hill Road turns off. Do you see what I mean? If you go straight down, you'll see a little Y.
Okay.
And that large open area, I believe, is the church. Okay? And the church is on the Gypsy Hill Road side, which would be if we call it north-south, which it's not, which would be the east. Okay? And that would be towards the speed camera. Okay? My property is, if you pick up the power line, okay, which is pretty easy to see because it goes all the way through, and then come back, I'm the first. There's another property that goes all the way over to
Excuse me, can you point out?
yeah, it looks like.
Oh, yeah.
And there won't,
Is this at the bottom of the picture?
So this is Mr. Stall's lot right here. Okay, and I'm right, you're right here, or I'm here, you're on the opposite side of the road. And we'll put it from on this. Okay.
I'm on the opposite side.
Okay, so you're here?
I am.
okay.
One at a
Okay, we're
time.
driving down this, yes, right here.
Okay.
I'm right there. And you can see I've got a lot of, that's a power line there, but I've got a lot of woods, and I mean, that is, that's like a cliff coming down. And this is Gontras's driveway.
Okay.
You were talking about getting access from Gypsy Hill Road. I used to ride bikes there back when I was young. And that's pretty flat up there.
This is
And
Pico?
this, this is Gypsy Hill. If you come in from here to this property, you're coming into about the elevation of both Gontras's and his house. And if he's buddies with Gontras, Gontras is buddies with these people because they bought property together. So they have a relationship. But that's just a side effect. But there is in fact, you're up at that level on Gypsy Hill Road. And I happen to know Gontras has got a relationship because they bought property from the guy behind me.
Okay, so wait, just to get back on track. Because you've gone very far.
But there is something at your elevation.
So we've gotten kind of far afield. Let's kind of bring this back. So there were some issues with the church. Hold on, everybody, so that the court reporter could get everybody.
That water goes downhill and it's gonna hit here really hard.
Okay, so what you're trying to advise the advocate is that they're going to be getting some water from the runoff that's coming from the church.
Not some runoff. They are gonna be getting extreme runoff.
Okay. My question to you.
And I'm gonna be losing my culvert.
But that's going to be from the water coming from the church, or do you believe that there's going to be water coming off from this road that's going to be affecting you as well?
Anything they do there is gonna has the potential to speed up the water coming from the church further. Okay.
So just so that we're clear, what you're thinking is as it's rolling down the street, it's going to it could potentially pick up a little bit more from this property, which then is going to affect you a little further downstream.
And it's going to affect me across the road, which is where it all goes.
Okay.
There's a little tiny drain. Well, I pricked my ears when it said Gontras. He has a driveway that would never be approved now, that goes straight down from the 70s.
Understood.
And it washes into,
This is irrelevant. Can you stick to
it is irrelevant. It is, and that's what I said. I have no real quarrel with your stuff.
Okay.
But I want to get my 2 cents in on this, the retention pond of the church. Because if you can't keep track of the retention pond of the church for 25 years, what are you going to do here? His driveway is below my culvert, so I really don't care what it does. But what it does do is knocks trees down, undermines the state road. The water roars down. Not anything like the design he has. It's the 70s model, but it's the elevation of the house, which I won't even be able to see your house. We'll be barely able to see each other's lights, in the winter. But from the elevation of the house, they're about the same. And you can look over the edge there. It's a wreck. And he has a drain there. The state has a drain that has got twice the drop off that the drain in front of their house has. And, that crosses the road. And that drain gets fouled sometimes. I've seen them clean that. And, I wouldn't trust the drain going across the underneath the highway because there's no room to get any drop off on it.
Well, the good news is the township manager is here and he has heard your discussion with regard to the
But
church.
beating on the table.
So I thank you very much.
Okay.
I'd like to ask Mr. Reed just one question.
Okay.
So Mr. Reed, you came before us tonight. Are you asking the zoning hearing board to not approve the variances and special exception for this residence?
I'm saying you can't approve anything until you finish what you started at the church.
So you're asking
Until
us
there's
not,
water in that retention pond, I can't see you doing anything.
so you're asking us not to approve these matters tonight?
I'm, yes, based on the condition that the retention pond above it is, because that's where the water comes from. And now it's going up by their house. And which is, the state's got a place where it drains across. And it fills there, but it just rips down. It really, it's tough. And I'm sure that, the little silt traps and all that stuff, I'm sure that stuff all works, but it's not going to overcome what's going to come through, what comes through all the time from that church. And the township doesn't know anything about it. And I'm not blaming Jeff for God's sake, but it's, nobody does anything about it. They just sit and say, well, I don't know. You can look at it and it's barricaded off. But in the condition it is now, and it's sitting right there, all it needs is a backhoe. And somebody to cut, and then when there's water going in there, I got no, that's fine. But he's got water coming down at him that he doesn't know about, he's thinking it's gonna rain on it. It doesn't rain on it.
Can I just clarify from Mr. Reed? Are you suggesting that below this pond, that water comes sheeting across the Geist property south of this one and comes sheeting onto this property that we're talking about this evening?
I don't know exactly where it goes, but I know it hits me hard, okay? I'm right here.
Right.
And I know it overflows into the road, it overflows my driveway, and I'm in a flood. There's a certain amount of water that's gonna run across. But when it blows out, 30 inch,
You're not sure what's crossing this property that way.
it goes downhill and
Okay.
okay?
I got it. Understood. Thank you.
It's not, I don't, think it's crossing that property so much now. But I think it's going to disturb it. You're going to reach the front. I don't think there's a lot of buckets. You'll see channel coming off, like a mature part.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Reed has had a concern for a while. I know that. I've talked to him on the phone several times. Just to let the board know what I've been trying to do. I did meet out there with the township engineer, Pete Eisenbrown. We did meet with a member of the church. And we met with the family. I can't remember their last name, who has the ponies. You might remember.
Right. It can go across there.
Right. I can't place their name at the moment. So we have asked the church to provide us with a maintenance record of that detention pond. We're waiting on that. I do need to remind them, Mr. Reed is correct. I do need to remind them about that. The other thing is, and I'll say on the record, PennDOT does a horrendous job of maintaining Chesterville Road and the culvert pipes and those inlet boxes. Because it. So, and I know you don't know me from Adam, but it hasn't been for a lack of trying with PennDOT and sending emails and calling them and the township actually has spent money trying to weed out one of their culvert swales to get water in along the edge of the road because PennDOT wouldn't do it. So we will follow up again with the church for that maintenance record, but that just to let Mr. Reed know.
If you could tell us your name and your address, please. Sorry, I made it a maze.
Thank you. My name is Zachary Elwin. I'm actually, if you look at the map, I'm to the, according to the map, I'm east of you, but it's not really east. I'm I guess it is east of you. So
So it looks like you're actually directly behind. If we're looking at
correct. I'm the Gypsy Hill side of this lot. If you extend the lot further to the right and take it to Gypsy Hill Road, that's me. So I'm on Gypsy Hill Road and I match over to the Pico field on the other side. And I'm actually a little familiar with the history of the property at I don't know if you're related to the Cherries. The Cherries at one point owned the property. They got it as a $1 like inheritance thing. And they went to myself, the Gontarses. I think if you're talking about the Maurers as far as the ponies. Yeah, Kenny and Gail Maurer.
That's the name.
And they were trying to sell the property because they decided that they couldn't develop it. And they were basically trying to unload it, and asked the Gontarses, myself, and maybe you, I think they sent letters to all the people around it, basically offering to sell it so that it couldn't be developed. But the price they were asking for it was beyond what anyone thought it was worth. Irrelevant. And also just for the disclosure and transparency, I'm a member of the Township Planning Commission. We don't have any say in this, but just so it doesn't surprise you later if you find out that's who I am. My only questions, and I think you may have already sort of addressed this, but I'm not really sure. My only real concerns, and I'm not opposed to this at all, don't hear me that way. I'm concerned about if the tree cover and the ground is removed, given the nature of the slope, I'm worried that what's going to happen is we're going to have a landslide and trees are going to go down. I don't know if that's realistic, but given the rains that we've had, and I've seen I've lived in the house for 15-ish years, 17, and we've seen trees go down in heavy rains and all that. And I don't know if that's something you have thought about or addressed. Then the other question was, what is the intention for removing the ground that is graded off? Is it to leave it there and create an artificial hill, or is it to take it away? It's just a question. I'm just really honestly curious about what the intent is. Like I said, don't have an issue with the house. It's always been sort of a nice property, and I'm fully aware. I've walked that property any number of times, and it is rough. It's a lot of dead and down trees. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we don't anticipate any, obviously, landslides. I mean, obviously, the township has maximum slopes that are permitted for disturbed areas, which is a 1 in 3. So we're meeting all those requirements, and then like I mentioned earlier, applying erosion control blankets to all of those areas that are being disturbed. The second question was, I'm sorry, say it again.
What the intent is for the.
Well, obviously, we're hoping for a balanced site. So the grading on.
What does that mean? I'm sorry.
The balanced site would be cut fills would align perfectly, and that no on-site soil would have to be taken to an off-site location.
Oh, so basically it would just get redistributed essentially.
Yes. If that is not the case, the grading and the tight boundaries of the limited disturbance wouldn't permit us to create earthen berms or spread it elsewhere outside of the LOD, because that would obviously come in violation of these variances if they were granted. So if there is additional cut on the site that would need to be removed, it would be hauled off site.
Okay, that was the only concerns I had. I was worried that all of a sudden there'd be a big giant mound of dirt for me to stare at. Thank you.
Ma'am and sir, did you want to say anything?
No, I mean, we're the guys, so we're on the adjacent on the south side. And I just like to confirm with Mr. Reed's point that there is a water problem. We see it all the time at the green, the creek that runs between our house and the next house to the south. And that creek flows. So there's a lot of water. When we see the road coming down. So, the plans look great. It's just, I don't know, and I have to say that depending on grass, I mean, we can't grow grass. Our property is basically safe.
Right.
Push the buttons.
Right.
Yeah, I really wasn't intending, because the plans look great to me. But I do have to confirm Mr. Reed's point that there is a lot of water flowing down that hill. We get it from the ridge between the two properties, and it's flowing, into our house, and it flows off the back properties, including the now infamous church. And we have seen the road flooded. We have seen, there's a drainage on the far side of the road that Mr. Reed talked about. I guess that's the thing that's clogging up on you. That whole system seems to be clogged up.
Right, you mean where it comes out?
Right, where it goes down and it joins.
One at a time, please. So, and just for the record, you are Mr. Paul Geist?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, thank you. I just want to make sure we know who you are.
Right. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't even intending to get up here. I just wanted to confirm that there's a lot of water rolling down that system.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Thank you. Now, do we have anybody out in cyberspace who would like to speak?
Well, my question to you is, do you want the zoning and code enforcement officer to say anything? Do you have any questions? And
Does the board?
Paul Labe is,
I would like to hear from Mr. Labe if he wants to comment on that.
would too.
Paul,
Good evening. Can you hear me?
yes, sir, go ahead.
Hold on, Paul, we're gonna need you to be sworn in.
Okay. My full name is Paul Labe III, L-A-B-E. And I'm the zoning officer and represent LTL Consultants.
Raise your hand, please.
Yes,
So the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay, so Bill, did you have a question for Paul?
No, I just wanted to see if Mr. Labe had any statements or if he wanted to make any comment on this matter.
I guess my only comment would be that we would want confirmation prior to any, permits and so forth, should variances be granted. We want confirmation per the ordinance that fire access and emergency vehicles can access the site, which is one of the conditions in the zoning ordinance.
Right.
That would be my only, comment regarding the driveway and the slope of the driveway.
Mr. Labe?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's Bill Finch. What's your, have you been around construction of houses in slopes such as these on this lot?
I've done a few. There's been another one or two in Franklin Township that I've been a part of that have been in steeper sloped areas.
But didn't need variances?
I do not believe so.
What's your thoughts about the constructability of this lot?
So there's obviously flatter areas up near the top, which is where the house is proposed. Ideally they'll utilize those areas for the construction so that they don't have to do any sort of special engineering of any sort of, walls and so forth. But I don't see, looking at this plan, I don't see any, major design issues, from a building perspective.
Thank you.
Did you want to ask any questions of Mr. Labe?
I have one more question. Mr. Schreier, having heard about the runoff problem that currently exists, were you aware of that when you did your design?
Just making sure I was on. So ultimately, the runoff problem that they're speaking of does not in fact drain to our property. If you, if we want to get into detail on it, if you look at the map that he was showing you where the church is ultimately, which would be exhibit A3, the larger blow up of the area. So you'll note our parcels in red.
Yes.
So if you're looking at the plan so that the title block is on your right and the parcel's in the center, you'll note south of our property is a blue line.
Okay.
When that blue line is shown on a GIS map such as this, it's what is defined as a blue line stream, meaning that it's a defined stream by the state of Pennsylvania. So if you look at that, ultimately what that tells me is that that's the lowest point of the areas around it. So all of these lots, whether it be, tax parcel 72,532 1E, 1D, 2.3, 32.2, all these parcels are draining down to that stream bed, which then goes under Chesterville Road in front of the Geist property, and then travels along the north edge of Chesterville. And right above the word or the letter ILL in Chesterville, you'll note on the left of the page, there is 2 other streams that converge in that location. So now all of a sudden, when we're entering Mr. Reed's location, we've got runoff from probably, we'll say 100 acres for rough numbers, converging onto one area. None of that is going to be affected or drained to my client's property.
Okay. Okay, can we just check? I don't know if there's anybody else that's participating virtually. Does anybody have a hand raised or want to get any comments or?
There is Mr. Gontars. He's a resident if he wishes to say anything. John?
You have to unmute yourself, Mr. Gonzalez, if you'd like to speak.
Hello, John. I'm John Gontars, and I'm adjacent to the property. And I really don't have any real issues with it. The only thing that I would worry about, or not worry about, but would want to be considered is that you're going to have all this land which is being cut, and you're going to have grass put in. And my experience with my property, which is similarly treed to this property, is that grass does not grow there very well. Where I have slopes, I wound up using Pachysandra and other things such as that, and they seem to hold up quite well to water, although I don't have anywhere near the amount of water that I think will happen here. So that's the only comment I would make. But other than that, I don't have a real issue with anything here. Any questions?
Mr. Labe, can you hear me?
Yes.
These slope ordinances, what's the purpose of these ordinances? Why do we have them?
It's to ultimately protect natural resources. And as their engineer had stated, a steep slope is a natural resource.
Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. First of all, thank you everyone for your time tonight and to everyone's participation. We appreciate that. As a reminder, my clients are here seeking zoning relief that's permitted under your zoning ordinance. Variances are permitted under the zoning ordinance. Special exceptions are permitted under the zoning ordinance. So what they're doing tonight is not anything unusual or contrary to what your ordinances say. I suggest that the simple question is, has the applicant, through its testimony, its exhibits, et cetera, satisfied the criteria of the ordinance? Because that's what the law looks at. And I suggest to you that they have. They've proved a hardship, and I might suggest it's even a textbook hardship when you look at, unique characteristics of property. Steep slopes it kind of defines that situation. And I suggest if you think about what you heard, that we've met all the criteria for the 3 variances requested, as well as for the special exception. This whole thing is to create a home for these people. They want to become part of Franklin Township. They bought the property here several years ago with that hope. And that's all we're doing here. It's not something that should be problematic to the neighbors at all. It's just another single family dwelling. Everyone who spoke to you tonight lives in a single family dwelling in that very area. Some of them on slopes that I'm going to guess, I haven't been out there to do the calculations, are not too dissimilar than what the stalls are dealing with here. So I would suggest that they have met the criteria and the variances as we've requested should be granted. I also would like to respond to a couple things if I could. Concerns about the runoff from the church. I'm sure your solicitor can let you know and clarify to you. And I'll be very, very basic about it because I didn't bring any case law to show you, but there's plenty there. These folks are responsible for what's happening on their property. They have no legal responsibility for what's happening on somebody else's property. And even if you decide through a condition that they have to address that, they don't have any legal rights to do that. The problem with the church and the runoff there is whoever owns the church property and who's ever operating the church property. And I suggest that's where the township should be focusing their efforts to address the concerns of Mr. Reed, who's convinced that the water is coming down from the church property and affecting his property, not our folks. And I also suggest that you can't, if we meet the criteria for the zoning relief we've requested, the law doesn't permit you to deny that relief simply because there's an undocumented and undetailed water situation supposedly on another property. And I say that because there's been no engineering as to what water is coming off that property and what may be going on to my client's property. There's been nothing but a statement from someone who hasn't been recognized as an expert of what he thinks is going on there. And I understand he lives there and he's lived there for a long time, but the reality of it is you have an engineer, a landscape architect who's been acknowledged as an expert who testified that this plan is going to reduce the amount of water that's coming off this property. And that's what it's designed to do. And that's what it's intended to do. There is no evidence whatsoever in front of you tonight that he's wrong. There's no evidence before you tonight that even questions what he's told you. You heard your own zoning officer speak to the fact of that he didn't have any material issues, I think, to put words in his mouth, and I apologize if they're wrong, but with what's proposed here, his concern was simply about access of the fire and emergency medical personnel, which we suggest is absolutely an appropriate concern. I also think that's something that's going to be addressed by other entities in the township here, but it is certainly something that the stalls want to make sure is okay too. They don't want to build a house that a fire truck can't get to. That would make no sense to them. Then I will put them in potential risk. The other thing I want to point out is the discussion earlier about instead of accessing this property from Chesterville Road, that the stalls should somehow go get an easement through one or more properties that surrounds them. And again, I'm going to refer to your solicitor and ask you to please check with her. But I would suggest if that was made a condition of this approval, that would not be a legal condition. The requirement that these folks go to one of their neighbors and get a ownership interest in some portion of their property is not permitted under the law if you've met all the other criteria for the variance and special exception relief that we've asked for. Not only that, but I've seen firsthand happen when another township, who will remain nameless that I was involved in, required an easement on somebody else's property. That project stalled for a long time. We had to go to Westchester to get somebody to clarify that for us. Okay. And what happened was that neighbor saw an opportunity for payday. The demands put on my clients for them to get the required easement on the neighboring property were ridiculous, asking for almost $100,000 just in cash to even grant something like that. I think it's not only an illegal, but it's an unfair proposition or unfair obligation to put on the stalls if that's something this board is considering. Removal of trees, I just need to point to that. If your township has a tree ordinance, it's going to be followed. We don't have a choice. And they're going to do it anyway. They're trying to do the right thing here. That's why we're here in front of you today, because it's the right thing to do. So the concerns about what trees may be taken off this property and how that may impact water flow, again, your tree ordinance should address that. If you don't have a tree ordinance, then it's not the stall's fault that that ordinance doesn't exist. They're operating within the confines and the constraints of the laws that exist in this township right now, and which the law says they have to follow, and that's what they're doing. They're not asking for anything other than what's permitted under your ordinance, and I suggest that we did meet those criteria as I indicated. So with that said, again, thank you for your time, and we would respectfully request this board to grant the 3 variances and the special exceptions that we requested. Thank you.
Thank you. The board is going to suspend the hearing at this point, and we're going to go into another room for deliberate.
Hey, Paul, Paul,
Yeah,
if you need to talk again, sir, please put your camera on for
okay,
the court stenographer.
no problem. Does she want to see my face now?
No, it's too late.
No, it's too late. You missed your opportunity.
Oh,
reconvene the Franklin Township Zoning Hearing Board hearing in the stall matter.
I would like to make a motion that the board approve the stall application as it was presented to us, including the 3 variances and the 1 special exception, with the condition that the fire marshal review and approve access for emergency vehicular access to the home.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Oh, okay. I'm not used to that. That's going to conclude the hearing for this evening. The board will issue a written decision in accordance with the MPC. Did you have a question for me? Because you look like you were waving. Oh, okay. 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 And we will issue a written decision. Thank you.
And good luck.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Yes. I'm thinking off the top of my head, but yes.